how old were you when they landed on the moon?
41, is that right? Gosh, I didn't realise it was so long ago. More than half my life ago, yeah.
Where were you when they landed on the
I was working. I was at the hospital at St James's.
How did you feel? So what were your emotions?
We were very pleased, you know. We were very pleased because, you know, I mean, obviously we were pleased that the astronauts had got there and then got back safely. But yes, everybody was very pleased, you know. Great achievement, you know. Probably the most astounding thing that has happened perhaps ever, you know.
Okay. So, you've already mentioned this, but did you see it on TV? You didn't, hear it on the news or anything, or...?
Well, I'm sure we had it on the news, on the radio first. And then we knew it was going to be on television, sort of more or less everybody was expecting it, you know, knew it was going to happen. I mean, first of all, of course, we knew that, because, you see, they orbited the moon several times before they actually landed. So we'd seen pictures of the spacecraft going round the moon. They would know it was going to be on television, and we would watch it on television. But we already knew it had happened, you know, it had been successful.
Who were you with at the time? So, when you were watching TV, were you with, Grandma or Dad?
Well, I'm sure that we would all be there. I think, well, depending on what time of day it was, I mean, I would be there, Mona would be there, and probably Ruth, Alison and Neil were all, I think we probably all watched it together. And we watched it at home. I mean, we hadn't gone to somebody else's house to watch it or anything like that.
Okay.
Because we had our own television then.
So, before the landing, did you, if you listened in on the radio, did you hear lots of discussions and interviews about people who had a role in getting the spacecraft to the moon?
Oh yes, I mean, I seem to remember, you know, it was on all the time. You know, there was nothing much else. I mean, nothing else was so dramatic. So every time you put the television on, you'd either be seeing pictures of the spacecraft going around the moon, or you'd see people talking about what was expected to happen, and you'd be told all about the astronauts that were there. One of the strange things was that everybody always remembers the two names of the two astronauts who actually landed on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody has to stop to think, can't remember who the third one was, because there was always three on these Apollo spacecraft.
Yeah.
And one of them was a commander who had to stay with the spacecraft. And usually people forgot his name, and they remembered the two who actually put spacesuits on and landed on the moon.
In the years before the landing, you know, the space race, did you feel that the space race was rushed compared to what it should have been? So Russia versus America.
Well, you got that impression because I think it was President Nixon, if I remember right, at the time, and the Americans had a sort of big campaign to put somebody on the moon. It didn't just happen. You know, they were sort of very annoyed that the Russians had put a man in space, and I don't know whether they've actually orbited the moon, but they were sort of getting in front of the Americans, which the Americans hadn't expected. And so they were determined that they had to do something to sort of get the lead back, if that's the right word. So it was a big effort. You know, they spent enormous amounts of money, and it was a big campaign to do this, as I say. So everybody knew beforehand that they were going to do it. They were going to have a try, because they wanted to get there before the Russians did, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly it was probably I don't know whether it was rushed, but they certainly put a lot of effort and a lot of money into doing.
When they landed, did you see anything in particular, like, that you found interesting when they landed on the moon?
Well, yes, I suppose so, because nobody had any idea what it would be like. And I think the thing that I was a bit surprised about was that the capsule that they went down on, I thought they would just open a door and climb out in their spacesuits. But actually it was on sort of like tall legs, which had joints so that it could sort of, act like springs. It would take some of the shock out of it landing. So they actually climbed down a ladder to get onto the surface of the moon. And I don't think I expected that at all. I thought they would just step out or jump out. But the door to the spacecraft, the capsule, was probably about 6 feet off the ground, something like that. So they had a little ladder thing that they climbed up. And we saw them do that. You saw them actually go down the ladder. And then sort of, I think they jumped off the last couple of steps. And the other thing that I remember about it was they sort of sank into the surface of the moon. It was like a sort of sandy beach, but softish. So when they walked on the moon, they left big, like walking in snow. There were sort of holes where the footsteps had been, which again I think I hadn't quite expected. I somehow thought it would be hard and rocky. And it was, as I said, more like a beach that they landed on.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they started walking, because the gravity's so much different, they actually sort of bunny hopped. They jumped because they were so much lighter than they would be on Earth. So when they took a step, they probably went about 6 feet.
So, what was it like to see the moon, like, so close up? Because not many people had seen the moon.
Well,
before.
we'd seen pictures of it because, as I say, the thing had orbited the moon several times, and they'd done that before in preparation. So we had some idea. Everybody talks about a moonscape, which means very rocky, barren, sandy sort of. No vegetation, of course, with no trees, grass, or anything like that. So we had some idea what it was going to be like, and I think they had to carefully pick where they were going to land. And I seem to remember they were aiming at one place, and when they came near it, it was too rocky, and they had to fire the rockets and move the spaceship a bit further on to find somewhere that looked reasonably flat to land. And of course they didn't know what it would be like landing. For anything they knew, when the spacecraft landed, it could have sunk into the surface of the moon. But it didn't. It sort of stayed on the top. It was like a sort of, a bit like a beach, I suppose you would say.
So there'd been a few days. Was it still all over the news and everybody was
yes.
still talking about it?
Weeks and weeks. Well, of course, they'd got to get back, don't forget. So the next thing was that they sort of got back in the capsule. They had then to get that capsule back to the spacecraft, to the main spacecraft. Nobody was right sure. That was still experimental, so nobody knew that was going to work. So there was big relief when they actually got back and docked with the spacecraft. And then, of course, the next thing was we've got to come back to Earth. Now, although they'd done that a number of times beforehand on previous missions, it was still dodgy. They had to come back through the Earth's atmosphere when everything got very hot. And then they had to land somewhere because they had to be in quarantine. And when they got back, they couldn't just get out and shake hands with everybody. They had to, I think they recovered the whole thing, the capsule. So they were still inside the capsule, and that capsule was collected by some sort of big vehicle, and it was taken back to Cape Canaveral where it all happened. And then they went out of that, but I think they were in isolation. They hadn't come to the meet and shake hands with anybody. And I think they were, I don't know how long for, but for several days they weren't able to sort of mix with people until everybody was sure that they were all right and that they hadn't picked up any strange bugs or diseases.
So after all this, do you think anybody still thought the moon was made out of cheese?
No, I don't think so.